you're looking to dive into topics on how to live a happier, healthier, more fit, and long lifespan, then you've come to the right podcast. Living the Dream with me, Coach Damien Evans. Together, we will explore the topics on all things health, fitness, and wellness. Together, we will be lifelong learners on this journey to living the ultimate dream. What up, Dream Team? Coach D here, coming at you from beautiful sunny San Diego. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing a question that I get all the time from people that I coach. As people get into the fitness world and start taking workouts and start joining certain exercise programs, they are inevitably going to run into the challenge of completing body weight movements and exercises. Now, what fitness is to me is the ability to go through life knowing that I can overcome any physical task that I'm presented with. If I have to jump over something, I want to know that I can jump over it. If I have to climb something or lift something, my goal in life is that I never have to encounter that moment where I say, I can't do that. And if there's something in life that I come across that I'm not able to do yet, then I make it a goal to focus on that thing to help me strengthen that aspect of my training. Now, of course, there's going to be crazy things and extraordinary superhuman tasks that I won't be able to do, like lift a car or jump over a river, unless I really specialize in training for that maybe, but no, not really. That's not something that I really want, so I'm not going for that. So that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is most everyday physical feats that an athletic, strong, independent, balanced athlete would be able to do. From hiking to the top of any mountain or entering into a Spartan race without training for it and be able to lift myself over multiple obstacles and walls, and be able to lift and control my body during any type of body weight movements or exercises. That is what it means to me to be fit. And that is why every single day I make it a point to do body weight movements that I want to be doing when I'm 90 years old. I want to be able to get off the floor without using my hands. So every single day when I'm on the floor, I make sure I don't use my hands to get off the ground. So when I'm down on the ground, I make sure I get up any other way except for using my hands, because I want to be able to do that every single day for the rest of my life. I make sure that I want to be able to push my own body weight around. So every day I do at least 10 push-ups, usually a lot more on some days, especially like chest days. But I want to just make sure that I have that ability. I also want to make sure that I can pull myself up over something if I had to. So every single day I do at least one pull-up. Usually on anything I can find, like a bar or a ledge or a tree branch or a kid's playground. But the point is of me saying this is because I know that with our ever-advancing technological society, we are being asked much less frequently to perform movements in which we have to be strong enough to control our own body weight. We can get anything we want without moving at the flick of a finger and the touch of a screen device. Which is why one of the most common questions I get asked as a coach is, how do I get better at blank exercise? You can insert your least favorite body weight exercise in the blank. Do you think it's, let's say, squats or push-ups, pull-ups, planks, lunges, sit-ups? Well, don't you worry, because in today's episode, we're going to be touching on all of them. We're going to discuss the strategy of working from where you are right now and what your strength currently is, and then the strategies on how to progress towards being able to be your own American Ninja Warrior athletic self that you have the capability of being if you really put your mind to it. But before we get to the topic of the day, I want to start by thanking the sponsors of this podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Lululemon. Lululemon has some of the best athletic wear for both females and males, and I only wear Lulu when I'm not in my work clothes. The quality of material and durability and breathability are perfect for my active life. Another one of our sponsors is Dirt Food. Dirt Food, healing and delicious superfoods made by hand and made with love. Dirt Food was created by a local San Diego friend of mine who was going through her battle with cancer and looking for cancer-fighting superfoods to help her defeat her 2 different types of cancer that she had. She created a delicious and healthy superfood granola that she makes by hand in small batches in her kitchen. So visit eatdirtfood.com, and use the discount code DIRTYDAMIEN, DIRTYDAMIEN, and you're going to get 10% off everything that you purchase. So Dirty Damien discount code at eatdirtfood.com. And this week's 5-star review comes from N. Gerbino. And I'm pretty sure this is one of my awesome Eat the Frog members, Nicole. What's up, Nicole? Nicole writes, Coach Damien is a great resource, fun to listen to, and the topics are super relevant. It's easily broken down so you can take actionable steps to make better choices and be informed on our wellness journey. Thank you so much, Nicole, for your support and your kind words. That's what we're looking for to do out of each masterclass is to take a deep dive into the history of a subject, why it's important to us, and then always leaving us with actionable items. So we're always looking for episode ideas if you want to throw those out there for things that will help you guys chase your fitness goals. If y'all haven't done so yet, would you do me a favor? Go ahead while you're listening to this episode, search Living the Dream podcast. And if you haven't subscribed to it, go ahead and subscribe to that and then scroll all the way down. And if you feel that I've earned it, leave a 5-star review. I read every single one and I really appreciate the feedback. All right, friends, and now on to the topic of the day. For today, we're going to go and focus on getting better at moving our own body. Something I tell people that I coach all the time is if you have a body, you have a gym. If you have a body, you have a gym. There are a few bodyweight movements or exercises that, if you can master them, you can build a strong, independent, aesthetically pleasing, and capable body. You can do these exercises almost anywhere. And what's really great is once you master the movements, then they can easily be loaded up with heavier weights if you earn the right to progress them that way. There are many benefits and pros to doing bodyweight exercises and mastering bodyweight exercises as opposed to strictly using dumbbells and barbells and machines to work out. First off, it's super inexpensive. It's free. Buying workout equipment is extremely expensive in comparison to being able to understand bodyweight movements and how you can use your body as a gym. Being inexpensive and the fact that you can do it anywhere takes almost all of our excuses away that we try to give ourselves as to why we can't train. So being able to master bodyweight exercises makes you more athletic as well. It makes you more capable when doing everyday physical tasks. A pull-up or a push-up, while yes, they are much more challenging than a bicep curl or a dumbbell chest press, you also reap the benefits of the more challenging efforts. Bicep curls may make you much better at picking up multiple bags of groceries, but bodyweight movements help you be able to pick yourself up off the floor if you're ever on the ground. They are compound movements that move multiple joints at once and coordinate that movement together and really transfer power throughout your entire kinetic chain. These bodyweight movements help with your proprioception as well, which is your awareness of where your body is and what it's doing in space. And if you build a solid foundation of learning how to properly execute these exercises, bodyweight movements can be much more beneficial towards your conditioning and body fat loss goals. Yes, this can get abused when you get the out-of-shape, stay-at-home mom who enters a group fitness class and then all of a sudden they ask her to do these 15 burpees as fast as she can. Yeah, that's going to cause some issues. But if you've trained and strengthened the basics, all a burpee is it's a hinge squat followed by a plank push-up with a little bit of extra plyo flair thrown in there. But if you've trained all the individual components of the burpee to where you have the stability, the strength, the control when slowed all the way down, then you could really use your body as a great way to train for cardiovascular endurance, as well as that high-intensity interval training style. Plus, the more body fat that you drop and the more fit you become, the more fun these movements are to perform. So it's kind of like an upward spiral of confidence and ability in yourself, as well as the satisfaction of knowing you can perform whatever physical challenges that you may encounter throughout your day. Much more than, let's say, like an overhead tricep extension or a dumbbell low row. Now, the things you need to be concerned with when executing bodyweight movements is that you're going to be at a much higher risk of injury if you do too much too early. If you try to do a bunch of lunges but you don't have proper form, your knees are going to most likely tell you about it. And if you try to do a ton of push-ups, but your shoulder girdle is all out of whack and your shoulders are hiked up towards your ears and you bust out those half reps from the toes where you kind of just bob your head up and down, Well, yeah, you're mostly likely going to feel pain in your neck and your shoulders, maybe even your wrists if you haven't chosen the correct regression or progression that is what your current ability level is at. Now, bodyweight movements also require much more coordination. I mean, I've had some of the smartest people train with me, just absolutely brilliant. People that I would trust with my life when it comes to programming on a computer or investing in the stock market or building their own business. Yet, when I say the phrase palms up or knees out, they become a spazzed out baby giraffe who thinks that I'm speaking Portuguese, and they look at me like I just told them to do a backflip. Coordination is so important, especially when it comes to bodyweight movements. I mean, yes, coordination is an extremely athletic skill that many people just do not possess at this point in time, but that's not to say that they can't become better at it, just like any other skill. But that's just one thing that bodyweight movements require. Definitely a little coordination, more than, let's say, a seated leg extension on a machine or a seated leg curl. I'm not saying that if you're not coordinated that you cannot do a bodyweight squat or a sit-up, but what I am saying is that it's going to be much harder to learn and master at first. So you have to just have an awareness of that. If you aren't coordinated as you go through these bodyweight movements, you can't get frustrated when they don't come naturally. So before we jump into the strategies of how to get better at bodyweight movements, I think it's really important to talk about the difference between what's called open chain exercises and closed chain exercises. So there's two kinds of kinetic chain movements, open and closed. In open chain exercises, the segment that's furthest away from the body, known as the distal aspect, usually it's the hand or the foot. In open chain exercises, that object is free and not fixed. So the furthest segment away, usually your hand or your foot, is free and not fixed in open chain exercises. The key word here is not fixed. So when you hear open chain, think hands or feet are not fixed. Open chain exercises have the load move around a fixed body position that is stabilized by a machine or a bench. This reduces the stability demands, generally making open chain exercise variations much easier than closed chain. So common examples of open chain exercises are like a lat pull down machine or a bench press or a leg extension or a shoulder press where you're seated on the bench and you're using dumbbells. Something like that where your body is fixed and you are moving the weight around. Now, in closed chain exercises, the object is fixed or stationary and the whole body moves around the object. So in closed chain exercises, the foot or the hand is in contact with the surface on which you're exercising. And you think that when you think closed chained, you're going to think hands and feet or feet are fixed. That's closed chained. So closed chain exercises involve body weight movement around a fixed position, integrating ground reaction forces. And internal energy management is required as well. Most exercises performing standing up are closed chain exercises because the athlete is moving its entire body around a fixed position of the ground. Now, a pull-up is also a closed chain exercise as the body moves around the distally fixed pull-up bar. The body moves around that pull-up bar. So let's break it down a little bit further because I know it can get a little confusing. Closed chain. A squat, for example, where your feet presses into the floor and it raises your body up and down. That's a closed chain kinetic exercise. Your foot is fixed on the floor. Now, using a leg curl machine where the lower leg and the foot swing freely is an example of an open chain exercise. Push-ups where your hands are on the floor, closed chain. Pull-ups where your hands are on a bar, again, closed chain. Lunges, your feet are on the floor, closed chain. All of these movements can be done with your body weight, or you can also put weight on your body to add that resistance. Most of the movements that we're going to be talking about today are closed chain when it comes to improving our body weight exercises. So that's an important distinction right off the bat. Open chain, remember, when you're thinking open chain, you're thinking not fixed. So common examples would be like bicep curls or bench barbell presses, raising your arms over your head while sitting in a chair, lifting a leg while you're laying on your back, so your body is fixed and your legs are moving. All those are open chain. A large advantage of doing open chain exercises is that they're really great at isolating a muscle. This can be very useful when rehabilitating a specific muscle injury or when training for a sport that requires the use of open chain activities. So, a form of specific training. An example would be like throwing a ball. That's a very specific movement, and you have open chain because your arm is moving and throwing an object. This is also very popular with bodybuilders. So, bodybuilders definitely like to train with open chain because you can isolate a muscle and you can really hammer on just like the biceps or just the chest. Now, a large advantage of closed chain exercises, which are these body weight movements that we're talking about today, and then others, is that they are considered far more functional in everyday life. You're going to be seeing these movements. They more closely mimic movements that you're going to see in your everyday life or even sports that you might play. And this is why in this episode, we're going to be focusing on closed chain exercise movements like squatting to pick up furniture or bending over to pick up a child. When we break down these exercises, we also have to look at both the strength aspect of the movement as well as the actual skill of doing the movement. So, strength versus skill, this is another important distinction. I know a lot of very strong people that can squat over 300 pounds on their back doing a barbell squat with both legs. But then if you ask them to do a single leg pistol squat with only their body weight, it's like they crumple to the floor. So if a 200-pound man can squat 300 pounds on their back, that's 500 pounds of strength that their legs are lifting up, or give or take a little bit. Yet when they take away all that weight and you ask them just to do a single leg squat with 200 pounds as far as their body weight, they can't even do it. And why is this? Their muscles are strong enough, but there's a huge amount of skill and stabilization required to do a single leg pistol squat. However, what's very interesting, at least from my experience, is that if you take a person and you get them really good at pistol squats and controlling their own body weight and stabilization and control and strength unilaterally, which just means on one side, when you train a person and they get strong with that unilateral movement on one side, well, then that person can be advanced super quickly when going to the barbell squat when they're loaded up with both legs. So building that foundation of single-sided strength transfers way better into a double-sided exercise than double-sided exercises transferring over to a single-sided exercise. I hope that makes sense. Skill is super important when you take away the double leg being able to balance. So for me, I love to train people to get really good at doing strong body weight movements and when possible, single-sided body weight movements. And then we can progress them to a heavier load once they have mastered the body weight. It's really, really fun to watch people and the strength that people grow from as soon as they have that solid foundation built. It's almost like a light switch switches. They have this great form with their body weight. They are able to do this single leg stuff. And then you go ask them to load it up. And yeah, it does take a little bit for that strength aspect to come, but it comes very fast. And that's really cool to watch. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love bodybuilding. I love spending 90 minutes every day just isolating muscle groups with dumbbells and barbells. It's actually my way that I decompress. I like to go in, put my headphones on, and just totally zone out. But there's nothing more functional when training to be a more capable human than having the skill of being able to control your own body weight however you want to. So now that we know all the benefits of bodyweight training, let's really dive into the strategies and techniques on how to train. If you want to get better at anything, frequency is king. Yes, I'll say it again. If you want to get better at anything, frequency is king. So let's consider two different scenarios. What would make you a better piano player? Scenario one, if you took one day out of your week and you just sat down and you played for 3.5 hours and you just practice for 3.5 hours, one block of time, one time a week. Or if you broke that up and just did 30 minutes every single day, I can almost guarantee you're gonna learn faster and you'd become a much more skilled piano player if you practiced for the shorter amount of time, but you did it every single day of the week consistently. That's just how the brain and the neuromuscular connections work. You are laying down these neural pathways, or what some like to call muscle memory. And that is reinforced every single time that you move that way. So you're laying down these myelin sheaths that go from these motor neurons from your brain to your muscles. And every time you ask the body to do something, you are reinforcing that pathway. Now, if you just do one large bout of practice, but then you take 6 days off before you do it again, much of what you have learned is going to be lost because your brain is going to say, okay, we did it once, we did it a lot, but now I'm not using it for a few days. I can probably just put it on the back burner. And when it comes to the skill of these bodyweight exercises, the actual skill of performing these movements, the movement and frequency of the movement is as important as the strength to do it. Now, frequency can definitely get you into trouble when it comes to exercising if done at too high of intensity. Of course, if you exercise too high in intensity and you do it too much, you're going to have a bad time. If you overload a muscle so far that you get extremely sore from that muscular damage that you accrued, then the amount of time it takes to recover from something like that big soreness is longer than a 24-hour period. And if you train too soon before the muscles have recovered, then you're actually doing more harm than good. What's fantastic about bodyweight movements is that they're much harder to hit that point to overload where you went too far. And the bounce back, in my experience, is much shorter than what I've really experienced with super heavy weights and heavy resistance strength training. So doing heavy squats or heavy deadlifts, the amount of soreness that I get from that and a workout of that nature is much greater than had I done a bodyweight push-up workout or a bodyweight pull-up workout. So being able to do many days in a row of these bodyweight squats or pull-ups or push-ups at a sub-maximal level is completely in the realm of possibility for even the most deconditioned person, especially if you plan accordingly and you can read your body and make adjustments along the way. And what I mean by that is if we have a goal to get better at push-ups and we do, let's say, 10 push-ups every hour for 8 hours, that's 80 push-ups in a day. That's a ton of volume. If you're just starting out and you probably wouldn't want to start that high. However, let's just say you did start with that on your first day of trying to get better at push-ups, and the next day you can feel the soreness and the damage in your chest, then maybe the next day you can practice with elevated push-ups, and maybe you only do 5 elevated push-ups every hour instead of 10 regular push-ups every hour, but you still get that signal sent to the body and you're still practicing the form. That would be an example of hitting a high amount of volume, but listening to your body the next day and adjusting your workload, but still being able to practice the skill of the push-up with a reduced load. So here's my prescription for you. This is where you're going to want to write this down and put together a plan of your own on how you're going to get better at certain bodyweight exercises. So it's going to take a game plan. I love to reverse engineer. If I have a goal of getting to a certain number of a certain exercise, where do I finish? And then how do I work my way back to where I am right now? And how can I start small and slowly build? So here's what I would write down. Here's your starting week. You're going to perform your exercises 1 to 2 sets per day. And you're going to do that 4 to 5 days per week. So 1 to 2 times a day, not too bad. That's nothing. But you do it 4 to 5 days per week, and then you add up all your total reps for the week. So let's say week 1, your total reps for the week were 100. Well, each week we're going to increase our volume. We're going to keep the same amount of sets, but our goal is to improve our reps for the first couple of weeks. So from week 1, we did 100 reps. Now week 2, we're going to be doing the same 2 sets per day, and we're going to be doing that for the same 5 days. But this time, instead of doing 10 reps, we're going to bump it up a little bit, and we're going to do 12 reps per set. That's going to give us like 20 extra push-ups by the end of that next week. Now, watch your soreness and your overtraining, because, if your muscle gets extremely sore, as in it affects your natural body mechanics, and you end up walking funny or unable to lift your arms up and wash your hair, then you're going to want to adjust your load. Continue to do the movement, but regress the weight. And I'm going to tell you how to do this with each individual movement in just a minute if you need to regress the weight on them. Now, you also have to make this your main goal. Something else might have to take a back seat. So if your goal is to become better at pull-ups, but you crush your back at the gym one day, which affects your ability to do pull-ups for the next 3 days, then you've totally sabotaged your frequency. I'll give you an example here. When I was playing basketball in college, I was kind of actually one of the more skinnier guys on the court. I really wanted to build muscle. So I focused on building muscle, but I lost the skill of shooting because I had kind of affected my body and I had focused so much on heavy resistance training that I lost the skill, like any other bodyweight movement that we're talking about, and the touch of my shot. Or when I was training to get my best mile time, I was unable to lift my legs super heavy because it was affecting my goal of being able to run a mile faster. So whatever your main goal is, you have to make this your main goal and then put the other stuff on the back burner. You can come back to those goals whenever you finish hitting, whether it's your push-up goal or your pull-up goal or whatever the case may be. You can come back, but make sure that you make this your main goal. There's more benefits of doing bodyweight movements every single day. It's what I hear called greasing the groove. This is a term I learned while listening to one of my favorite biohacker fitness professionals named Ben Greenfield. Ben is awesome. He talks about greasing the groove in his book Beyond Training, which is like a huge, gigantic book he wrote on how to train for extreme sports like Ironmans and Spartan races. If that's something that you're into, I highly recommend looking for Ben Greenfield's Beyond Training book. We all know that to get stronger, we need to progressively lift more weight. But there's another component to getting stronger that often gets overlooked by the starting lifter. Strength is a skill, and you can improve that skill by greasing the groove. So when you lift something, neurons send signal to the muscle fibers to contract, and the more efficient that process is, the easier it is to do that movement. The more you practice this skill, the more you're training your neuromuscular system to make that required movement. You're basically improving efficiency. The easier the movement becomes. That's why playing the piano is awkward at first. But the more you practice, the more effortless and easy it becomes to flow your fingers beautifully over the keys. You're increasing neuromuscular efficiencies. Strength is just a skill like any other. To increase the efficiency of your neuromuscular connection, we need to practice the movement we want to improve on frequently, aka greasing the groove. We grease the groove by performing a low set of reps of a specific movement multiple times per day. A low set of reps, a low number of the exercise of the specific movement, and you do it multiple times per day. The more times per day you do the particular movement, the more efficient the neuromuscular system becomes at that movement. And the more the neuromuscular system becomes, the more efficient that becomes, the more reps that you can do. And then the more reps you can do, the stronger you're going to get. So you can see how there's kind of an upward spiral here. So here's how it works. You pick an exercise that you want to get better at. Let's go with pull-ups. You're going to do a short set of reps, maybe 40 to 50% of your max several times a day, with plenty of time of rest in between sets. How many reps and how many sets per day, you ask? Well, there's not going to be a fixed number, and it's going to be different for everyone. But really, the more you do, the better. You do as many reps and sets as you can without making yourself feel fatigued. The goal is to work on the skill and not so much find super bad muscle failures, at least not most of the time that you grease the groove. We're not trying to go to failure. You shouldn't feel too tired. You should feel pretty fresh minutes after performing your set. Think of it kind of like, I just want to get a little pump. If you go to failure, you're going to start to activate the body's defense mechanisms, and soreness will hinder the process of frequency. If you've ever seen, let's say, a plumber's forearm or a mailman's calves, you're going to notice that they have super developed muscular definition because they are day in and day out, Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day, working that muscle frequently throughout their workday. The body's going to respond to the stresses that it encounters. It's an adaptation machine. If you send the signals constantly that this muscle needs to be stronger, or you use this muscle a lot, if it needs to be called on very frequently, the body's going to respond by making that muscle more resilient. Practice the skill at submaximal levels. The plumber isn't tightening these wrenches until he collapses. The mailman isn't sitting there on the steps doing calf raises until he can't walk anymore. They're just doing repetitive high volume reps at a submaximal level. So if your goal is to develop a movement or a muscle, then your goal is to let the body know that it's important to you. The only way to do this is to practice it as much as you can, all at the levels that grease the groove and don't create too much damage. Just little tiny stress signals frequently, as well as the neurological mind to muscle connection benefits that you're going to get by practicing perfect reps more often. The best way that you can do this is to make rules for yourself throughout the day. Play games with yourself when it comes to getting better at this exercise that you want to improve. One way to set yourself up for greasing the groove is to, let's just say we want to get better at push-ups. The rule could be that every time you pass through a certain doorway in your house, you're only going to do one or two push-ups, or maybe 3, depending on where you're at. The next time you walk by it, you're going to do another 1, 2, or 3. That's it. And by the end of the day, you may have done, let's say, 20 or 30 push-ups. And because the sets are so spread apart, and because you only did so few reps per set, you shouldn't be too fatigued from those 20 or 30 push-ups. You may feel like a little soreness the first week, but nothing compared to if you were to do 10 straight push-ups twice a day or 3 times a day. If you did 10 straight push-ups, if you make sure that you stay at a sub-maximal load, then that soreness is going to slowly subside with the more often that you do it. Do it every single day. You're going to get much better practice at the push-up, and in a few weeks, you can add 1 to 2 reps to each set. Now, I know what you're thinking. Coach, I can barely do 1 high plank push-up, 1 high toe push-up. Well, yeah, that's super common. Not a lot of people can do a push-up. It's hard. But the idea is the same. You can do whatever you can. Just do it at 40 to 50% of what your ability level is. So I'm going to talk about how to regress the push-up in just a minute, but there are many ways to do, let's say, elevated push-ups or kneeling push-ups, and that's how you would attack this particular situation with reps that you actually can do until the strength is there to progress to the more challenging variation. Same thing would happen if you had a pull-up bar in your doorway. You walk by, you try to do 1 pull-up, or maybe you walk by, you jump up, and you lower yourself down once. It's just greasing the groove at a sub-maximal level. Each day, you should start with the submaximal highest progression, followed by some mastery and volume with the regressions. So what do I mean by that? Starting at a submaximal high progression and then mastering the volume and the form with the regressions. Well, meaning try to do a push-up on your toes for your very first set. And once your form starts to suffer, then you regress to an elevated push-up with your hands on a countertop. And you just really focus on super slow tempo, really big full range of motion, chest all the way down and up, perfect form. Same thing with the pull-up. Maybe you can only do 1 real pull-up, and that's probably generous for most people. But if you can, maybe you do that 1 pull-up in the doorway, and once that's over and your form starts to suffer, then you regress to a banded assisted pull-up, or you use a stool to help you get your chest to the bar, and you work on perfect form, helping with the leg and the foot on the stool. Now, when I say regression, that's the easier version, right? And progress or progression is the harder version. So that's really what greasing the groove is practicing, doing a rep or 2 of the highest progression, the best form that you can. And when you can't do that anymore, you drop the regression and you work on practicing perfect form in the easier version. I really do believe this is the secret sauce to becoming better at bodyweight exercises, greasing the groove. Now, I'm not going to go too far into mobility here, but because I'm going to really dive into mobility in its own individual masterclass episode soon. But mobility will be a huge aspect of your ability to build the solid foundation from which all of these exercises stem from. I, personally, spent 10 years progressing exercises, working to get better and stronger at these exercises. And it was not until I took the sacrifice of taking the time to work on the control of my body at the end ranges of motion and my mobility in each movement, it wasn't until then that I really started to get rid of all the random injuries or the aches and pains, and finally see the progress that really affected my performance in my life. Mobility is being able to get your body into a position. Some would consider it a stretch, but I'll tell you why it's not just a stretch. Once you're in that position, You then ask the body to fire up that stretched muscle and work on strengthening the muscle in that lengthened or even in the overly shortened position. However, it's likely that the shortened position is strong enough right now, and it's then when it's in the lengthened position where we could really use more work in the lengthened position, because we're usually really good at squeezing and shortening the muscle, but when it's long, we have a harder time calling upon those motor units. So for example, if we can get into a 90-90 position with our hips, or getting into a deep squat where we spend time down there applying tension with our hamstrings on our calves, or even working on our shoulder mobility at the bottom of a push-up or the bottom of a pull-up, making sure that we have the right shoulder mobility at each position. Only then, once we get the mobility in those positions to be able to control it and be strong enough in those positions, only then should we then start to think about loading up the weight on these movements. We should be able to execute a perfect full range of motion rep in an as controlled effort as if I told you to stop that movement at any time. You could stop at any time. Now that's control. But the only way to do that is to practice mobility exercises in all the major zones of the body: the shoulders, the mid-back, the thoracic spine, the trunk of your body, the hips, the ankles, the feet. Each area is super important in its own way when it comes to being able to control and move the body in ways that it was intended to move. Now, I'm telling you this right now, if you neglect your mobility, you will never be as successful at these movements as you could be if you worked on building that strong foundation of control and stability. Strength and progressions will come in full force once you have attained your mobility. It's going to come so much faster than if you just grind away year after year trying to increase your weight and never have that foundation built. I mean, otherwise, sure, you can get really good at push-ups. You can get really good at pull-ups or squats without doing your mobility. But it's only going to be a fraction of what you're capable of had you invested the time in creating your solid base from which to build from. And it's going to take away a lot of the random injuries that happen when we train, because we now have the ability to control that weight when it gets out of control and when it gets into our larger, more lengthened ranges of motion. Now, I'm going to include a link to my YouTube channel in the description of this episode, and you're going to find tons of mobility videos that I've done that you can watch and actually follow along with. If you're new to mobility, just choose one of the pre-workout mobility flows and follow along. It's 15 minutes of mobility followed by a 5-minute body weight warm-up, and you can get straight into any workout after doing those flows. The more you practice mobility, the better. I haven't met anyone who has been able to do too much mobility. Now, I'm sure there's someone out there, but in my opinion, the more mobility you do, the more capable you're going to become with your body. So I'll include the link to my YouTube channel in the description of this episode. All right, so without any further ado, we're going to dive into each of these common bodyweight movements, and we're going to talk about the regressions and progressions of each movement. If you don't hear the exercise that you want to get better at, just use the basic understanding of what I talk about in order to properly train to get better at whatever your specific movement is. Or you can always reach out to me and I can send you some ideas. You're going to hear some very common themes as we talk about ways to meet you where you currently are with your exercise. You, as always, start by learning how to perfect the lowest regression, the easiest version, and then you work your way on greasing the groove until you get strong enough to progress to the next level. Once you hit that next level, you start over with perfecting the movement, greasing the groove, and you just keep moving up the progression ladder. You're going to do this until you've perfected the highest progression of the bodyweight exercise, and that is when you can start loading it up with weighted challenges or even power challenges. So for a push-up, once you've mastered the knee push-up, you go to elevated push-ups. And once you go to the elevated push-ups, you work on dropping that angle a little lower until you become parallel with the floor. And once you're there and you have that angle and you can do a full plank toe push-up, after you've mastered that, which takes a really long time, maybe you could progress to hand clap push-ups where you clap your hands after each push-up and you leave the ground with a little bit of power. Or Superman push-ups where you explode off the ground with your hands and feet and temporarily fly before landing back into your next push-up. Now that would definitely be an example of an extreme progression. So since we're talking about push-ups here, I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant because I rarely have the time to explain this to people, especially in the group fitness settings. As a coach, this is the exercise that people have the most trouble with, both in personal training sessions and in group fitness settings. This is the one exercise I wish I could just sit down with each person and spend a whole week working on the basics until they have the foundation, the strength, and the skill to perform the movement correctly, which it takes some practice, and very few people I coach can do a perfect push-up. Yet we ask them to do sets of 10 to 15 push-ups at a time in a setting where they feel like they have to get them done in a short amount of time. That's not a very good combo. This is inevitably going to lead to half reps or chicken head pecs or hip sagging efforts or rolled forward shoulder dominant press-ups. I mean, this is the exercise I see people lifting the most with their ego and not with form and perfect skill acquisition in mind. Most people think that they should be able to do 10 push-ups easily, let's say. While most people, and I'm talking to you fellas out there too, most people do not do perfect push-ups, especially once we start talking about sets of 10. Now, if you're over here saying, oh, whatever, coach, I can do 10 push-ups easy. I just want to get better at doing more push-ups. Okay, well then, first off, prove it. Post a video of your stories and tag me, and I'll let you know if your reps are perfect. And then if they are perfect, I will for sure give you the credit when it's due. But I'm going to let you know how to progress it from there too, and I'll work right with you on getting a little bit better at the progressions. But most of the people listening to this podcast right now, I'm talking the majority, like 80% of the people that I coach, need to check their ego at the door and start back at ground zero. Work on the skill of a push-up at the most regressed level. Then start making progressions once the foundation is built. So when I was in the military during basic training, the most that I ever did, I did 122 push-ups in 2 minutes, in 120 seconds. 122 push-ups in 120 seconds. That was my best score ever. However, I never did 120 push-ups until the time of the test. What I did do was maybe 5 to 10 times per day, I would drop down and I'd do a set of 25. And each month I would add, let's say 5 push-ups to my set. So on month 1, I would do 25 push-ups at a time, maybe 5 to 10 times per day, way sub-maximal. I can do a lot more than 25 push-ups, but I just did 25 push-ups at a time. And I did it lots and lots throughout the day. And then the next month, maybe instead of 25, I did 30 push-ups 5 to 10 times a day. It's greasing the groove. And I worked my way up until one day I took that PT test and I busted out as many as I could. I had the adrenaline going. I had the preparation going. And that's how it works. Push-up, regression by elevating yourself. This is the best way to get strong enough to be able to perform what I call toe push-ups. Toe push-ups are high plank position push-ups, full range where your body moves as one solid plank and your elbows drop all the way down to 90-degree angles, or even deeper if you have the strength and mobility to do it. Now, most people attempt toe push-ups and only drop a couple of inches, leaving their elbows fairly straight, and then because they can't have the strength to stretch their chest or lower themselves with their chest, they compensate by dipping their head down, and it makes them feel as if they went low enough. But yes, dropping to your knees, you can do that, and it's a great way to regress the push-ups. However, it doesn't allow us to feel what it's like to maintain a perfect plank form from shoulders to toes. It shortens that lever by taking the lower legs and then the quad strength completely out of the movement. Dropping down to your knees is beneficial when you're in a group setting, of course, because there's no counters or stools or anything that you can elevate yourself on. But it's really not the best way to finally be able to obtain a full toe push-up. So this is where it might take a little bit of homework, going home, greasing the groove on ledges at your house or chairs at your house or steps at your house. I've seen people that are able to do 20 knee push-ups in a row, but then when you ask them to go to their toes, they can barely do like 5. So the strength and the skill doesn't really translate super well from knees to toes. Finding a surface that is elevated so that you can keep your plank is the best route to go. Once you've mastered that height, then you can progress down to a lower height and keep progressing until your hands are on the ground. Or even further, if you wanted to, you could elevate your feet and go the other way. When your feet are on top of something, now you're elevated and you're in what's called a decline push-up position. A really good tip that I use with my clients is if you're somewhere in between your knee push-ups, and you can do your knee push-ups fairly easily, and toe push-ups, which toe push-ups would be really hard for you. If you're in between, what you want to do is you want to start your push-up on your toes and you want to lower your body all the way down to the ground. I'm talking your chest actually drops and touches on the floor. You can even lift your hands up if you wanted to. Once you're on the floor and you're there, push up from your knees until you're all the way into a knee plank push-up, and then return back to your toes and repeat. So lower all the way down from your toes, touch the floor with your chest, drop to your knees and push up from your knees, and then return back to your high plank position. So what you're doing is you're doing the lowering phase of a toe push-up where you're stronger in the lowering phase. It's called the eccentric phase of the movement. And then you're pushing up concentric with your knees until you can get back up into that plank position. If you can strengthen the eccentric phase of the movement and then drop the regression for the concentric phase of the movement, meaning when you push yourself back up on your toes or on your knees, you'll help your chest, your pec muscle, become strong enough to one day be able to push yourself all the way back and up from your toes instead of having to push up from your knees. Now, hand release push-ups, yes, hand release push-ups are also a great way to know if you're ready to progress the push-up. If you can lower your body all the way down until your chest is and your hips rest on the floor or whatever ledge you're on, releasing your hands off the ground and then pushing all the way back up to the starting position in a perfect plank, then you know you're probably ready for some weighted push-ups. If you can do that easily for 10 reps, then maybe you buy a weight vest and you can put a vest on you while you do push-ups, or put a weight on your back, have someone place a weight on your back, or even use manual resistance where they put their hands on your shoulders as you push down and they kind of resist you a little bit as you come back up. Or after mastering the hand release push-ups, you can try some power-based variations like the hand clap, the Superman. You could do the double knee tap where you jump up, tap your knees, and go back to the plank. Really tough. There's an infinite number of push-up variations. Just go to YouTube. Search advanced push-up variations, and you're going to see fitness professionals' creativity shine here. I'm also going to include a link to a YouTube video that I filmed on how to do proper push-ups. The sound quality is not super good because there's lots of waves crashing in the background. I did it on the beach, but I think it's much better for you to watch this than to hear me try to explain all the verbal cues. So check out the description of how to do proper push-ups in the episode notes. Moving from the push-up, let's talk a little bit about the squat. When you do the squat, you want to keep your feet flat, feet hip-width apart, and you want to go to a range of motion where your chest does not fall forward and your heels do not come off the ground. Also, you don't want your butt to wink underneath of you, so when your butt kind of folds underneath of you. Common deviations that we see in a first-time squatter is that they just want to go from up to down. So they move their knees forward and their heels come off the floor. Their knees cave in most of the time and come closer together, which in this position, all of the weight then transfers into the toes. It puts a super uncomfortable load on the front of the knees that really those person's knees probably haven't earned the strength or the right to be in that position. It's not that they can't get into that position. It's just that they most likely haven't earned the right to be there yet, most likely. You're also going to see that the chest falls forward, and a lot of the time it's just they look like they're either arching their back or their chest comes down because they can't get lower in their legs. But when performing a squat, the upper body should remain fairly the same angle throughout the entire movement, at least while you're still learning. Once you get advanced, you can always start and play with your knee, your ankle, your hip angle to hit the glutes or the quads in different ways. But that's years and years into squat practice. So for the most part, the upper body should remain the same angle throughout the entire movement. It's going to be really important to be able to perform this movement in a full range of motion from standing upright into a full deep squat if you want to have an overall good quality of life when it comes to movement. There are actual studies that show that if you can sit in a deep squat pain-free for a prolonged period of time, if you can sit in a deep squat, you're more likely to live a longer health and lifespan than someone that is unable to. Lowest regressions for a squat would be to do a sit to stand assisted by a TRX strap or holding on to something. If you have a chair or a TRX or a pole or a doorway, Basically, you're looking for the ability to hold on to something with your upper body while keeping a neutral spine, of course. And then you can lower yourself onto a chair or a box or any surface that you control the height of. So maybe we start just above knee height. We sit to stand until we use our upper body as much as we can until with that height, we can do it without using our upper body. Once you can easily do it there, then you lower the surface that you're sitting on and you continue to use your upper body and help until you've earned the right and strength to be able to do it at that height. And you keep doing that and you repeat this until you're all the way down into a deep squat with your hamstrings on your calves and your feet flat on the floor, hip width apart or closer. Once you're able to do that, then it's time to start loading your squat. So, in my opinion, all of this stuff where we have people throwing on barbells on their back and they're still unable to do bodyweight squats all the way up and down, I really think that we could be doing much better when it comes to working on our squats if we were to be able to master the deep squat first. Then maybe we hold a dumbbell to our chest and we get it into the goblet position. And maybe you just move slower and increase your muscular time under tension with that dumbbell, that light dumbbell, until we can start putting the big time weight on our back. I'm going to include a great video that I found on YouTube so you can see what I'm talking about when it comes to getting into a deep squat. If you'd like to get a visual, the video is called Squat Regressions. So check out the link there. And if we talk about squats, we got to talk about pistol squats too. A pistol squat is a very challenging single leg squat. You can tell who is an overall athlete from a strictly strength athlete when it comes to looking at who can perform this movement. There's balance, there's stability that needs to be addressed if you want to be able to move from 2 legs over to 1. A lot of the time when we have pistol squats in a group fitness setting, we give the regression for the pistol squat using a TRX. This is a great way for being able to help with your strength and technique and confidence of the movement. However, guess what it completely takes away? The TRX takes away the ability to work on the balance and the stability of the movement. So there's pros and there's cons to using the TRX suspension trainer or a pole or a doorway to help you with the pistol squat. It actually takes a lot of skill to be able to do the pistol squat without any kind of assistance. I'm going to include a great YouTube video link on this as well when it comes to the pistol squat. So check that out. Let's move on from a squat to a split stance squat variation, or what we like to call lunges. The infamous lunge. One of the most common phrases I hear when training clients and our members is that, quote, "I can't do lunges because they make my knees hurt." I mean, this is insanely, frustratingly common. If this is you, don't feel bad because you're in the majority. What I tell them first is not to use the word can't, of course, because, yeah, I'm that annoying coach. I say, you're only unable to do lunges right now. Most of the time, they come back at me and they're like, no, I just can't do them. I have arthritis in my knee, or I have a complete knee replacement, or the doctor told me not to lunge. Now, I usually don't say this because I don't have that much time and I don't want to go into a whole long conversation and I'm going to go down the rabbit hole if I go this route. But I'm sorry, friends, if you say this, it's a complete cop-out. If you could see what my knees have gone through and come back from, you wouldn't believe for a second that you aren't capable of doing lunges ever again. Now look, I get it. What these people are actually saying is they're saying every time I do lunges, they hurt, and the pain persists for a long time after the actual activity. Therefore, it is not worth it to me to do lunges. I don't want to do more harm than good, and I don't see the benefit of doing lunges when they always hurt me. They don't say it that way because that would take a really long time to say, but that's what they're saying, and that's 100% fair. But guess what? Lunging is just a deeper progression and a deeper range of motion as your gait. When you walk or when you run, you're doing a variation of a lunge. If you climb stairs or if you go on a hike and you're climbing up big steps or rocks, or when you walk your dog, you are literally doing fraction ranges of motion lunges. Lunging is one of the 7 fundamental movements that every single person should be able to do for the entirety of their lifespan. If you don't do them, you lose the ability and strength, and eventually this is going to transfer into your gait. And that's where the walker comes in, or the scooter. And then eventually there's no more gait for you, period. You're getting older, you use a walker, you then go to a scooter, and then you're in your bed. Running, jogging, walking, assisted walking, it's all a slow, deteriorated regression that ends in a permanent stop. So now that I went straight up dramatic, let's just bring it back and talk about ways of getting these folks moving how they should. A lunge is just a split stance squat. There are so many ways to work your way into getting all the way to the bottom of a lunge where your knees are at 90 degrees and your upper body is vertical to the floor. Most of the time, I hear that lunges cause knee pain, and it's a direct relation to the strength and the mobility of their thigh muscle, their quad muscle, and their hip flexors. So think about it. All day we sit. The hip flexor from your thigh to your hip bone, it's shortened, and then it gets weakened over time. And if you look at which knee hurts on a person when they lunge, it's rarely the front knee. Usually that's only if you're doing forward lunges when the heel comes off the ground and causing their weight all the way up onto their toe and the momentum then shifts into that front knee. That's usually the only time that the front knee hurts. But the most common is the back knee feels pain when lunging, because this is where the hip flexors are super stretched and they're tight. And the quad is tight and it's weak. So think about that stretch when the back leg is down and you have that back leg all the way stretched out from the hip down to the knee. Think about that angle of what that hip is doing. That's going to be a huge stretch. And your thigh is connected to your kneecap or your patella. And if it pulls on the kneecap, not to mention if your knees are out of alignment, of course, if they're caving in or out, which is a completely different story, then of course, if you train the knee and you train the lunge that way, your kneecap is going to be going off the rails. It's not going to be going where it needs to go into the groove. And that stretched muscle is weak and it's going to be saying, hey, I'm not strong enough to do that. Of course, the body is going to tell you that there's pain there. It's going to send a protection signal saying, no, stay away from that for now because I'm not quite sure we're ready for that. Not only are the soft connective tissues like the patella tendon and the ligaments not strong enough to hold that kind of weight because, well, to be honest, we just never asked them to do that. And you haven't worked or earned your way to get to that point yet. But they are also not mobile enough to get into that stretch position because we never asked them to. So what do? Well, we regress. We start super easy until we've mastered that, and then we progress. First is obviously your mobility. You got to work on your ankle and your hip mobility. It's a must here. I'm going to include some hip and ankle mobility exercises from videos that I filmed on YouTube. So if this is you, if you have knee pain when you do lunges, you got to actually work on your ankle mobility with the combat stretches, also the hip mobility exercises that I post about, like the 90-90s or the floor frogs. So check those out. And when it comes to the actual lunge movement, we can use a TRX, a pole, a doorway, just like a squat. We can elevate our front foot so we're not going down quite as far. You should be able to do a full, slow, controlled lunge. I'm talking 5 seconds up and 5 seconds down, going all the way till your back knee just kisses the floor, and then all the way up until you're back to a starting straight leg position. You should be able to do sets of 5 of those full range of motion reps pain-free before you ever start to load up a lunge with weights in your hands. Technique of the lunge is super important too. A lot of the times people line up their feet when they're lunging, and they line up their feet where it's on a balance beam. And what I mean by that is that your feet and your knees should still remain hip width apart, even when in a split stance. So even when your feet are one in front of the other, I try to explain this by saying your feet are on train tracks. So if you put your feet hip width apart and then you move them into a lunge position, you move your feet on train tracks. You don't move them onto a balance beam where they're heel to toe in line. Your knees are just as important as your feet to make sure that they're out and in line with the toes. If you were to look down with your eyes at your front foot, you should be able to see your big toe on the inside of your front knee. I explain this by saying aim your knee in the direction of your pinky toe. Check out the handful of videos that I've posted on exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to regressing and progressing the lunge. It's in the lunge link section. Okay, moving on from lunges to pull-ups. Pull-ups are hard. They're just hard. There's no other way around it. I would say that these are one of the most challenging bodyweight movements that you're ever going to do. If you're going to get really good at pull-ups, your body size to strength ratio has to have just be at a really optimal level. I mean, if you're a giant human being, and even if you're super strong, it's going to be harder for you to do pull-ups than that super jacked upper body guy that never works out his legs. You know, the skip the leg day type. Yeah, that guy. That guy's going to have a super easy ability to do pull ups because all he does is work upper body and there's nothing on his lower body to pull up, even if he's not as strong as that huge, strong human being, but he has a lot more mass to pull up to the bar. Now, with that being said, anyone can do a pull up. I'm talking anyone. If you're listening to this right now, you can do a pull up. More importantly, in my opinion, every person should be able to lift their own body weight one time up over a bar if they had to. I mean, what happens if you go hiking and you slip and now you're hanging off the edge of a cliff? You don't want to have to wait for that moment to wish you had worked on the strength to be able to do one full pull up. And I mean, not that we're ever going to find ourselves in that position, but I mean, there's only a very small percentage of the population that can do a full range of motion pull up, strict pull up with good form. But having said that, I would bet all the money that I own that every single person listening to this is capable of working their way to do that pull up. You have the capability if you really want it and if you train the right way. I found a really good 10-minute YouTube video that I'm going to share in the description of this episode that actually lays out a plan to get you from 0 to 5 pull-ups, and then from 5 to 10 pull-ups, and then how to really progress from there. I highly recommend the video if it's something that your goal is of getting better pull-ups, or just to get even just one pull-up. Go check out the video. It's going to be very helpful. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to understand what muscles are being worked when you do a pull-up. Most people are going to say the lats or the latissimus dorsi if we're going to give the full name. The lat is the main muscle mover, but you also see activation of the muscles in your core, your biceps, and your mid to low traps, which are more deep and toward the midline of your body than your lats. Your grip and your forearms are also huge contributing factors when you do a pull-up. So a great way to start is to start by doing the exercises that strengthen up each of these muscle groups. So if you can break it down and you can really isolate lat strength, bicep strength, core strength, forearm and grip strength, that's going to help to be a nice little solid foundation start. Dead hangs are where I start most clients once they have these muscle groups built up. Working on increasing grip strength, forearm strength, and core strength when hanging from a bar, that's going to be really, really helpful. So start by hanging on a bar for 15 seconds. Then work your way up to a minute, and then maybe even 2 minutes or longer if you get really good. Once you can do a 1 minute dead hang, then it's time to start work on what we call scapular pull-ups. These are a little challenging to explain without a visual, but if you want to see a visual, there are videos on YouTube you can find in the description of scapular pull-ups. But all you do is you hang from a bar and you let your body completely relax. You lower your body until your shoulders and your biceps are up by your ears. And then without bending your arms, you're not pulling with your arms. You're actually pulling from your shoulder blades, your scapula. Pull your body up as high as you can without bending your arms. And then you take your shoulders down away from your ears, pulling from your back, your scapula, your shoulder blades. This is a very small movement. I'm talking maybe like 3 to 5 inches at most. But this is the starting move of every single pull-up. If you were to do like a slow-mo breakdown of someone's back when they do a pull-up, the first 3 to 5 inches usually come from this scapular pull-up. Strengthening this is going to be super important, and it's going to be a foundational move for you to get to the full thing. So once you can do 3 sets of 10 reps of scapular pull-ups, it's time to start doing your assisted pull-ups. Now, you can assist your pull-up in many ways. First, I like to use resistance bands. Resistance bands are great if you have access to them, of course. They look like super giant rubber bands, and they come in like a ton of different sizes and different resistances. If you put a resistance band around the bar and then you step into it or you kneel into it so that it helps take some of your body weight away and it helps take you up towards the bar, this is a great regression. But not a lot of people have resistance bands. So if you don't have access to resistance bands, another way to get strong enough to do a full pull-up is negatives. Negatives are a great way to start, like if you have a pull-up bar in your house or if you have a pull-up bar in the park by your house. What you want to do is you want to use a step, a chair, or you want to jump up to the bar so that the starting position is your chest to the bar, however you get there. Now, once you are there, hold and squeeze. If you used a step or a chair, take your feet off, hold and squeeze your body up to the bar as long as possible. Hold, isometric hold. And then as you lose the strength, you lower as slowly as possible. Now, this is called an eccentric move, and it's going to get you very, very sore. No more than 1 or 2 of these types of eccentric sessions a week. You'll find at first you won't be able to slow your body weight down when you start maybe your first week. You're going to be like holding yourself, and as soon as you put your feet off the chair, you're probably just going to drop. So just note how long it takes you to descend from top to bottom. And slowly through time, you're going to practice to be able to do a 5-second descent and then a 10-second descent until finally you could do a 30-second descent all in one rep. Once you do that, you'll be ready to bust out a set of push-ups, or at least a couple push-ups pull-ups, I would guess. There are many other ways to get better at pull-ups, and I'm going to include some other videos in the description if you want to dive a little deeper. But here's a hack. This is a huge hack that I learned from the guys at Mind Pump, and it's all about priming your CNS. So let's say you can do a set of 5 to 10 pull-ups. Like you're in that range where you can do some, but you still can't do a ton. Well, here's what you want to do. If you want to be able to get towards the higher end of the pull-ups, deadlift a few super heavy single reps or triple reps. Rest for a minute and then go do pull-ups. You're going to literally fly up the bar. So what I mean by that is if I'm doing deadlifts, let's say a heavy deadlift would be like 225 pounds, or for ladies, 135 pounds. You do 1 rep of that or 2 or 3 reps of that, and then you rest, and then you go do a pull-up, your body weight is going to feel like nothing as you fly up that bar. So prime your CNS, your central nervous system, by doing a couple of heavy deadlifts. The goal is to go super heavy. That way your CNS is going to be primed and turned on for beast mode, and your body weight's going to be really light in comparison. Once you have the ability to do more than 10 pull-ups at a time, this takes a really long time to get to, so don't worry if this isn't you yet. After you can do more than 10 pull-ups, then this is where you should really start loading up your pull-ups using dumbbells between your legs, or even if you have access to a weight belt that has a chain on it that you can attach some plates to, add some weight to your pull-ups. That's going to be really good. All right, so after going through pull-ups, let's move on. Dips. This is an exercise that most of us listeners, and don't worry if this is you, we probably don't care too much about dips. But I definitely want to add this one in here because I think a lot of us could benefit from including dips into our training routine. Now, dips are an awesome exercise for the triceps, the core, and the chest muscles. Dips are usually famous because they can be seen when you watch these huge bodybuilder videos when they work out and they have like these 200 pounds of chains hanging off their shoulders while they lower and press themselves back up, clanging the chains and screaming with rage. But actually, anyone can really benefit from being able to execute a good quality dip, not just bodybuilders. The issue is, it takes some really good shoulder mobility to be able to get strong at having good strength in the dip, which the general population doesn't have very good strength or mobility in that range of motion in the shoulders. But if you're interested in toning and strengthening the back of your arms, if you want nice tone definition on the back of your arms, improving your shoulder strength and mobility as well as working on your core, I definitely recommend you adding dips into your routine. That's what this is going to do. You can definitely use a band like we just talked about for a pull-up. You can also just use your legs to help. So only use as much help as you need with your legs to help push you up and down. But you need to do this exercise with control because this one more than most is a higher risk exercise. You're at a higher risk of injury if it's done too explosively or incorrectly. I'm going to include a great video on how to get better at dips in the description, but here's my own hack when I do dips. So my advice is to never do dips cold. You should always warm up your shoulders by doing some arm swings, or what I usually do is I get a PVC pipe or a broomstick and I do some over the shoulder passovers where you grab it really wide and you take it up and over your head and you tap yourself behind your back and you go back over and touch your thighs. I mean, you should always warm up with another tricep exercise first. I shouldn't say always, but I like to always prime with a tricep exercise first to get that muscle firing. So maybe it's some bench dips where you're sitting on the side of a bench and you slide your butt off the edge, but you keep your hands on either side of you and you just slide your backside up and down the bench, dropping your butt towards the floor and pushing yourself back up. That's a great way to warm up your triceps. Some bench dips before you go into the bar dips. Once your triceps are warm and your shoulders are loose, you're ready to do body weight dips. Start in the low position. Here's the hack. You want to create tension. Start low, create tension, and then push up. You want to make sure you tense up your whole body. You're isometrically holding. If you brought your feet off the ground and you were holding yourself up, you wouldn't move. You'd be stuck applying tension. Don't start high and lower yourself, because this forces the muscles to work kind of in that bottom position when they're cold, and it's not super smooth. If you're cold and you drop down into it, you're at more risk of injury when it comes to your shoulders. But negatives work well here. So once you're warm, do a negative just like we did in the pull-up. You can start high and slowly lower yourself. Once you're all the way down, you take yourself back up however you get there, and you do it again. You could do this weighted. Check out the videos in the description for more on dips. Only a couple more exercises here, team. Let's go for some sit-ups. Let's go for some core. If you want to get better at sit-ups, you got to break the sit-up into two different parts. The top part, which is like just the very top half of a sit-up, and then the bottom part, which would be considered a crunch. It's important to understand that when doing sit-ups, you're not only using your six-pack ab muscles, which is the crunch movement, or your rectus abdominis muscles, but you're also using your hip flexors. So the hip flexors are from the top of the movement. The muscle that attaches on the thigh and your pelvis is your hip flexor, and strengthening the top half is super important when it comes to hip flexors, and the bottom half of the sit-up is important when you're strengthening your six-pack. You can also do negative sit-ups here, using momentum to get yourself up and then slowly rolling back one vertebra at a time. Old school sit-ups are where you lay your legs out on the ground and you lift your vertebra one at a time. So all the way on your back, you're nice and long. You place your hands on your legs and then you try to slide your body up and you lift yourself up one vertebra at a time with no momentum. Super tough. My all-time favorite exercise is the hanging leg raise. This is the king of all ab exercises in my opinion. And if you can't hang, I mean, sometimes some gyms are going to have what are called Roman chairs, where you can use your forearms and you can kind of hold yourself up with your legs dangling and then do leg raises from there. But definitely check out hanging leg raises or hanging knee tucks. Not only is it going to help with your core strength, but it's also going to help with your grip strength and your forearm strength, which will help with your pull-ups in the long run. Here's a little side note. If you're looking for six-pack abs, if you want defined muscles in your abdomen region, doing hundreds of sit-ups and crunches is not the best way to do that. The best way to build muscle is just like any other muscle. Yes, you have to lose the body fat over your abs by making sure that you're eating right and moving enough. But once the body fat is off, you can start to build your abs just like you build your biceps or your glutes. You want to do ab exercises that are weighted. Your rep range should be low. You shouldn't be able to do more than 20 reps of whatever you're trying to do. So for me, I love weighted decline bench sit-ups. I hold a weight on my chest or I put it behind my head, and I do decline sit-ups with me kind of angled upside down. Obviously, hanging leg raises, like I just talked about, love. I also like to do heavy cable machine wood chops for rotations. So I'll take a cable, I'll put it about shoulder height, and I'll do some nice little wood chop variations, which are amazing for strengthening your rotation. Or TRX/physio ball push-up to knee tucks. So I'll put my feet in a TRX or I'll put my feet on a physio ball, one of the big circular workout balls, and I'll do a push-up, and then I'll do a nice knee tuck where I bring my knees into my chest and return. Awesome exercises. Abs are just like any muscles. You doing 100 crunches is not going to help with anything except for maybe your muscular endurance. It's going to help with greasing the groove maybe, but it won't be very helpful in making those abs pop. It's all about the intensity of the contraction. I say this all the time. It's not a super high volume of reps. It's about taking that muscle to an overload. So heavy weight, big squeezes, intense muscle contractions, or said another way, flexing the muscle as hard as you can. That is how you build abs. So I'm going to move on to another core exercise here, the plank. Planking is another exercise that most people would love to get better at. I mean, planks, it's hard to know which is longer, a microwave minute, a treadmill minute, or a minute in a plank. All three seem like they take an eternity. Now, what I like to do with planks is a little different than most trainers that get taught how to do a plank. I did a video that I filmed, and I'll put it in the episode description, on how to do a quote-unquote proper plank. Now, my idea of a plank is to tighten and squeeze your midsection as tight as possible with a slight pelvic tilt. So think if you were in a plank and then you were trying to tuck your tail underneath of you. A lot of people will be like, oh, you're arching your back here, but I honestly think this is one of the best ways you can get stronger at planks is if you're doing active, big squeeze planks, not just kind of resting and stacking on your joints and kind of letting your skeletal system hold you up. You can regress a plank in many ways. It's very similar to a push-up. The same rules apply here. You can drop to your knees for a knee plank, but you can also elevate yourself and lessen the load, so elevate your hands. Now, when it comes to progressing the plank, the only limit of progressing planks is your imagination. I mean, you can lift any of your four limbs off the ground. You can add weights. You can add angles. I've even seen someone put together an entire Cupid shuffle routine by doing all plank variations. I'll include a video of some plank progressions to give you some ideas in the description of this episode. But I mean, you can come up with anything to make planks more interesting and more challenging. So that's really going to be it for the exercises that we talk about today. It's not really helpful to talk about them in depth, but the exercise videos that I posted in the description of this episode are going to be super helpful. So just go and find the exercise that you want to get better at. Take a look at the videos that I posted and see if they can help. And if you need more help, please reach out to me. I can really give you better suggestions when I talk to you and see where you're currently at. And I mean, if we could summarize this entire episode, if all we did were pull-ups and push-ups, you'd have an amazing upper body. If all we did were challenging bodyweight squat variations and lunges and pistol squats and Bulgarian squats, you would have an amazing lower body. A huge takeaway here is the best way to get better at certain bodyweight movements is to simply just practice that specific movement as much as possible. Perfect the foundation of the most regressed version and of that movement, and then get the stability and the strength down, then progress and continue that pattern for as long as you want until you get better at the movement and you are where you need to be when it comes to that next level. As far as the execution goes, the best way to do it is attach doing these exercises, attach that to a habit that you already do. Every time you brush your teeth, don't leave the bathroom until you've done your 10 to 20 push-ups or your 10 to 20 squats. Every time you eat, finish your meal with your movement. So maybe you do 2 minutes of planking after you eat, or maybe you go and you do 50 lunges. Every time you go through a certain door in your house, or you do a pull-up on the pull-up bar in your doorway. Before you can open the door to your fridge, you have to do your 50 bodyweight squats. Whatever it is, stack your exercise with a habit that you already do frequently throughout the day. What's something that you do frequently throughout the day? How can you attach your goal of getting better at this movement to that habit and activity? Now, nothing is going to be hard, consistent work. I mean, there's a reason most people can't do a bunch of these exercises. And they're challenging. Your body is rarely asked to complete these types of physically demanding efforts. But you are not most people. You're strong. You are capable. You can do whatever it is that you put your mind to. But you have to want it. You have to plan on how you're going to obtain it. And you have to put in the work consistently. If you want it bad enough, you can attain your goal. Do this with someone in your life. Create a support system that assists you. Maybe you start a group on social media where you send a set of push-ups to someone and you do a set of push-ups. Or maybe you have a space in your house where when anyone passes it, your entire family, they have to do a set of lunges or sit-ups. What is your goal? What is the plan that you want to do to get you to that goal? Attack that plan with consistency. Small behaviors compounded over time are going to elicit results. Greasing the groove and frequency is king. This is the secret sauce. Find a support system that you can hold accountable and that can hold you accountable. It is possible. It's going to be challenging, of course, but that's what will make it so satisfying when you finally attain it. If you have any questions on specific movements, please send me a message and I can definitely help you out.
All right, Dream Team, that's it for today. Please share with me any knowledge, thoughts, or questions you may have on today's topic. I'll make sure to answer and discuss on the next episode. You can ask your questions in the comments section or message me on any of the social media platforms. Also, I would be so thankful if you shared this episode with any of your friends or family that may be able to benefit from today's podcast. I would love it if you could do me a solid and screenshot this podcast and share it on your social media platforms and just write one takeaway, one aha moment that you got from this episode. This will help me know what's really valuable to you, and so I can keep the good information coming. And it also lets your network know if this podcast is worth a listen to them. Thank you so much for listening and learning here with us on the Living the Dream podcast. We are so grateful for you being a part of this lifelong learning journey. If you have any topics you'd like to discuss, please let us know in the comments or by messaging me on Instagram at CoachDamien_SD. Be kind to someone today, smile at someone today, and leave every person you come into contact with better than before. Until next time, friends, keep living the dream.